West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I served as a law enforcement officer for 27 years. It is a tough job. And good police officers deserve your support. You know, it's interesting to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle support the police when it is politically convenient to do so. Law enforcement officers risk their lives every day. They deserve better, and the American people deserve. I have the floor, Mr. Jordan.
Lady has
what? Did I strike a nerve? Law enforcement officers deserve better than to be utilized as pawns. And you and your colleagues are ashamed of yourself.
The gentlelady will suspend and the clock will be stopped. I want to admonish members. They must not interrupt someone who has the time.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
simply
question?
Can't shout out. If you think that someone is saying...
I agree.
Mr. Jordan, you don't know what in the heck you're talking about. You know nothing about what law enforcement officers
I know about my motive.
And you're using them as pawns because it serves ridiculous political purposes.
Val, everyone must suspend. I am making the point. No one may shout out when someone else has the time. Not Mr. Gomer.
Good question, Mr. Chairman.
Not Mr. Jordan. Nobody.
Not Mr. Cicilline.
Not Miss
Demings.
He didn't do that. Nobody
did.
Not Mr. Jordan.
Not Miss.
Nobody.
Cicilline. Okay, nobody. I agree with that. But
then how do we?
Everybody.
I have a question.
I will simply. There is no question. Nobody may shout out.
When you give a speech, Mr. Chairman, about motives and questioning motives, and then our motives are questioned, how do we address that?
The rules allow a request words
I have
point of
watched
inquiry.
them live and die, and you know nothing about that. And to utilize them as political
Mr. Chairman,
pawns,
I have a point of inquiry.
People will address comments to the chair.
Mr. Chairman.
The rules do not permit shouting out when someone else has the time. The only thing you may do when someone else has the time is you may raise a point of order if you think it proper, and the chair will then rule on the
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
So you gave us a lecture on people questioning our motives. When someone questions our motives, how do we address it when they're in the act of questioning our motives?
That is not a point of order.
Yes, it is.
That is not a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue, please?
It is not a point of order. Ms. Demings has the time, and the clock will resume. Gentlelady's record.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are on the side of law enforcement now. Because I don't know where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been over the last 4 years, including on January 6th, when police officers who protect us every day were fighting for their lives because of the big lie that was told, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were silent. As one person after another person took the microphone and said, go down there and engage in combat, fight like hell. They used the bicycle racks as deadly missiles against the law enforcement officers that you all say you care about so much. And thank you, Mr. Cicilline, because you're absolutely right. The only person who voted to support local governments and passed legislation to support local governments that includes law enforcement were the Democratic members on this side of the aisle. But now today, you support law enforcement. Well, I'm delighted to know that. But don't support them when it's politically convenient for you to do so. Support them when they're under attack by people fighting them and spraying them and knocking them to the ground and beating them with poles, with carrying the American flags and pipes.
Republicans have been consistent. The gentlelady from Florida said Republicans care about law enforcement today. We've cared about law enforcement all the time. It's been the Democrats. We condemned the violence on January 6th, and we condemned it last summer. It'd have been nice if our colleagues on the other side had done the same. All last summer, when police were being pelted with frozen water bottles, bricks, and beat up, where were they? They were raising bail money to bail out the rioters and looters who were doing those very actions to the police. And today we get a lecture about how we haven't been consistent? You got to be kidding me. We've been consistent. You guys haven't, and you know it. That's why you're all so fired up.
It is Wednesday, the 21st of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests, wherever they may be? Well, big day yesterday in that ACOP. ACOP, and you know which one. Yeah, that Derek Chauvin guy was found guilty on all 3 counts. And there was a lot of speculation whether he would have been found guilty on any count. Of course, the sentencing will go to the judge. Chauvin did waive his right to the jury determining it because they found him guilty on all 3 counts. I guess he was thinking ahead. Yeah, I'm not so impressed by the judge. Now, I've heard some analyses that show that he is a honest actor in that, for instance, when seating jurors, he didn't hold their opinions of policing against them. That he took it on, well, let's say face value a little bit more. He took it that they would fulfill their duty to be able to put aside any biases, to be able to render a objective judgment. So, yeah, that's fine. Except the way that he railed against Maxine Waters, to calling what she said deplorable. What? I'll tell you what's deplorable. Every single Republican out there whining about the trial while it was going on. How about Trump, who, if he didn't like something was going on in the court system or the courts or somebody was being unjustly tried, you know, a Nazi, he always had something to say. Did any judge issue a proclamation against that? No, of course not. They go after black women. All right? Because they're a convenient target. You wouldn't believe how much hate there is in Southern Oregon among the Nazi KKK white. And there's a lot of them here. Their hate against Maxine Waters. She's a foil. All the characters, all the racist characters that have been developed over all these many racist years are put on Maxine Waters right now. Anti-Maxine, thank you. Show some respect, please. Of course, they don't have any respect. And you know that there's a lot out there in MAGA world who saw black cops, black supervisors, black police chiefs, black experts testify at that trial And you know that they discounted every single one because they are black. The opinion of a black police chief has nothing of value to white America. And they're letting you know it right now. Because while that verdict was about to be announced, Ohio police decided, let's kill a 15-year-old girl just to show them who's boss. You go to a group home, a foster home, there's a scuffle. Now, it's all confusing, I suppose. But we're talking about teenage girls. All right? And I did not want to see the body cam footage, but then I did. I won't be watching it again. But do they train Ohio cops that when de-escalating a situation, stopping a fight, that you just fire randomly into a crowd? I know it wasn't random. He had her pegged out, and he plugged her 4 times in the chest. A 15-year-old girl. And don't tell me, she was 16. As if that mitigates the issue. Don't tell me she had a knife in her hand. We don't know what the intent was with that knife. There is some evidence to show that she was the one who called in the call for trouble. There was a fight outside the foster home. She could have just as easily picked up the knife and said, "What were you doing with this?" And the cop plugged her 4 times. Not in the leg, not in the arm. 4 times, center mass, dead. A kid. A baby, as far as I'm concerned. And then, what did the cops find in their empathetic souls to communicate to the crowd of people who were mourning the death of a 15-year-old girl at the hands of a cop? For whatever reason. What was their retort to the crowd? Chanting "Blue Lives Matter." George Floyd's death, the conviction of Derek Chauvin, changes nothing. We have a toxic element in our law enforcement. They're Nazis and KKK white supremacists, and they need to be rooted out. Anybody chanting "Blue Lives Matter" who is wearing a badge at a crime scene of a death of a 15-year-old girl needs to be fired. They need to not even be able to rent a cop position anywhere with Wackenhut. I would say they can't even get an administrative office job anywhere in law enforcement or near law enforcement. Make them dig a ditch. So, yes, we do have our work cut out for us. We continue. And Val Demings at the top. She's not giving up. She knows where this is going. With a racist like Jim Jordan. He knows nothing of law enforcement, but it is a prop to hold up to people to kick the libs. Well, you know what? We're punks, and punks kick back. I don't know. I think all the hippies turned into Nazis, to be honest with you, and they voted Trump. At least anecdotally, that's been my experience. I can't tell you how many people I know from back in the day who, well, it's not too unusual because some of these people I know from back in the day were very susceptible to any kind of cult. You know, Free John, Scientology, any of it. So it's not such a big step to follow a demagogue like Trump. Oh, no. I didn't read the story. But apparently in the fever swamps of maggot land, they're calling for Barron 2052. Really? Gee, I'll be 97 years old then. I don't want Barron anywhere near the levers of power. That kid is like the kid in The Omen. Jeez. I'm serious. I think that's the kid from The Omen. Scares me. It should scare you too. We should make sure that never happens. But somewhere, the Trump family will continue to get a platform. How is that possible? I'll tell you why. Because money doesn't talk, money swears. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? A Sikh group wants law enforcement to investigate the FedEx mass killer's possible white supremacist links. Yeah, they've been keeping that one a little quiet, aren't they? Yeah, because I'll tell you, Sikhs carry around a curved sword for ornamental purposes, But let me tell you, they know how to use it. I've been around. Corporations gave heaps of cash to the GOP after vowing to punish them for the Capitol insurrection. Yes, they've been quietly doing it. We're not going to donate any money to any Republicans who voted against the certification of the election. But now they are, because, hey, you can't have a Nazi state without corporations being part of it. And the Oregon gun storage law that is headed for a vote would be among the toughest in the U.S. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where media freedom around the world has deteriorated dramatically during the pandemic. And Japan reported the Chinese military is behind the cyberattacks on 200 companies and research organizations, including the country's space agency. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Seems our snoozing sous chef is snoozing away, but we love him for the good job that he does, and he does it quite well, can you tell? Okay, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and Kelly's been a very busy woman lately, so thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you would then look across the page to the left, which is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And that is there, not because we're trying to become some sort of Glenn Greenwald media empire. Jeez. No, that's there because, to be honest, we need help to pay our bills. Because we found that when we pay our bills, we can fly under the radar and continue resistance broadcast radio as the founders originally intended. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we are then able to pay those said bills. Then we are able to fly under said radar, and we are then able to fulfill our stated civic duty as the founders originally intended more than 10 years ago. Yes, that's right. We are celebrating our 10th year anniversary. And we are able to do it because of the generosity of folks like you. In fact, it might even be you. So thank you for your generosity. And thank you in advance to those of you who might deem it possible that you could afford to do so in the future. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You can go to @NetrootsRadio. It's right there. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And he's been pretty busy, too. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes, the links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you do know who they are. And yes, indeed. So follow those show notes and links also, because that's where the real reportage is. Okay. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Yes, and they're everywhere too, and we know that. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of the Associated Press by Rick Callahan. You know, I tried to join Reuters. They've changed their platform. They are expecting to get more money than the Huntington Library got in a year to be able to read their articles. But there is a free limited time preview of their beta site. All you have to do is sign up. And then they give you a confirmation email. You respond to that confirmation email. You sign up or sign in, and nothing happens. Nothing. It just sits there on the sign up page. I know you might say, oh, well, did you plug in your passcode correctly? Well, yes, I did. Many times. So the idea of spending, almost $600 a year to read the Reuters, maybe we'll have to pass, unfortunately. I have counted on Reuters as being part of the bullpen of newsworthy sites. But, oh well, I don't know. I think that maybe you might want to bring the cost down a little bit. Maybe. Okay. So, as I said, this first article does come out of the Associated Press by Rick Callahan. A Sikh civil rights organization, some people say Sikh, I say Sikh, called on law enforcement to investigate whether a former FedEx employee who fatally shot 8 people, 4 of them Sikhs, at a Federal Express facility, FedEx, in Indianapolis last week, well, if he had any ties to hate groups. The Sikh Coalition's request came a day after Indianapolis police released a report from last year stating that an officer who seized a shotgun from Brandon Scott Hull's home after his arrest in March of 2020 saw what he identified as white supremacist websites on Hull's computer. The coalition, which identifies itself as the largest Sikh civil rights organization in the U.S., said it has sent letters to law enforcement and state and federal lawmakers clearly expressing the continuing and urgent need to investigate the possibility of a bias motivation in last Thursday's mass shooting, they wrote in a statement. Hull was arrested last year at his family's home after his mother told police her son might commit suicide by cop. The prosecutor said on Monday that after his arrest, Hull never appeared before a judge under Indiana's red flag law, which allows police or courts to seize guns from people who show warning signs of violence. Hull, aged 19, used 2 rifles to kill 8 FedEx workers and wound several others inside and outside the facility, and then fatally shot himself before police entered the building, authorities have said. Now, let's be clear about rifles. We're not talking about a .22, all right? We're talking about semi-automatic weapons of war. Please. A police report from Hull's March 2020 arrest says that he became anxious while being handcuffed and asked his arresting officer to cut the power to his computer, saying, "I don't want anyone to see what's on it." The report adds that while securing the shotgun, an officer saw what, through his training and experience, were white supremacist websites on the computer. I would say that you don't even need to have police training and experience to recognize white supremacist websites like Stormfront. A complete and thorough investigation, including determining the motives behind this attack and any collection Mr. Hull has to hate and white supremacy groups, is essential to providing justice and building trust between the Sikh community and local and federal law enforcement, the Sikh Coalition's legal director, Amrith Kaur, said in Tuesday's statement. Kaur added that the police report released on Monday stood in stark contrast to a statement a day after the shooting from Paul Keenan, special agent in charge of the FBI's Indianapolis field office. At the time, Keenan said the FBI had interviewed Hole after last year's arrest, based on items observed in the suspect's bedroom at that time by Indianapolis police. He did not say what items were found, but said agents who interviewed Hole in April of 2020 found no evidence of a crime and did not identify Hole as espousing a racially motivated ideology. Oh, really? Why is it that Black Lives Matter and Antifa are the scourge of our society, but these little white supremacist KKK skinheads seem perfectly fine with the cops? Why is that? Professional courtesy, maybe? On Tuesday, Keenan said, that was yesterday, by the way, Keenan said that no probable cause was found to initiate any type of legal federal process against Hole, adding that the FBI takes great care to distinguish between constitutionally protected activities and illegal activities undertaken to further an ideological agenda, which means white supremacist websites like Stormfront and others. VDare, Oh, no. Well, that's just his constitutionally protected right to be able to be a Nazi. Okay. In response to the Sikh Coalition's comments, he said that the FBI is not ruling out any motive at this time, including one based on hate bias. He said the agency will be meticulous and thorough in our investigation and devote as much time as needed to find answers for the victims' families. Indianapolis police said in a news release on Monday that FedEx fired Hole in October 2020 when he failed to return to work at a facility on the city's southwest side. Indianapolis Police Chief Randall Taylor said on Friday that the vast majority of the facility's workers are members of the local Sikh community. And last week's shooting was the deadliest outbreak of violence collectively in the United States Sikh community since 2012, when a white supremacist burst into a Sikh temple in Wisconsin and shot 10 people, killing 7. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Senator Rick Scott, who voted to reject the results of the 2020 presidential election, is in charge of his party's effort to regain a majority in the Senate. Despite his attempts to throw out President Joe Biden's electors, several corporate PACs gave tens of thousands last quarter to his group, including some PACs that pledged not to. The National Republican Senatorial Committee, which Scott chairs, disclosed its finances yesterday, Tuesday, for the first 3 months of 2021 to the Federal Election Commission. It reported receiving more than $750,000 in contributions from political action committees associated with corporations and trade associations. According to research by the Center for American Progress Action Fund, several of those PACs had been critical of Scott and other Republican lawmakers who voted on January 6th against accepting Biden's victory. Some had promised to pause their PAC giving. Others explicitly vowed to stop funding these legislators. And now this is quite a comprehensive list. Let's take a look. CVS Health said in January its future PAC donations were under review based on the events of the past few weeks. It gave $15,000 to the National Republican Senatorial Committee on March 30th. Well, that was quick. Home Depot, we would expect them to go back on their word. I mean, the only test that you need to pass to work at Home Depot is a drug test. No one knows anything except some pretty good drugs, I got to tell you. Home Depot released on January 27th a statement that it was pausing to take time to carefully review and reevaluate each of the members who voted to object to the election results before considering further contributions to them. So one day after CVS, they decided to send $15,000 to the National Republican Senatorial Committee. You know, they figure that that's about how much time it takes America to forget what happened on January 6th. Intel, well, how dare they? That PAC gave the party committee $15,000 on March 2nd. Wow, that was way before CVS and Home Depot. And that was according to Popular Information. The tech giant said in January that its PAC continuously reevaluates its contributions to candidates to ensure they align with our values, policies, and priorities, and that we will not contribute to members of Congress who voted against certification of the Electoral College results, as we feel that action was counter to our company's values. But then they changed their mind saying, oh, well, you know, yeah, the people that were there, but we're talking about the National Republican Senatorial Committee. We're not giving it to insurgents. We're giving it to the Senate. Oh, my God. Now, Oracle. I should, for the interest of being open and disclose facts that about my past in this story, I did do some private chefing for Larry Ellison. Quite a bit. And everybody thought he was a dick. And I had no idea who he was the first few times I met him. I worked on a fine dining yacht charter, as you may well know, on the San Francisco Bay. And it was quite plush. And we would have Oracle parties several times a year. And Ellison would come back into my galley and chat me up. I just thought he was a regular worker. So I didn't treat him like a lot of people did, you know, very, you know, deferential and, you know, ass-kissing and frightened, I think. I just treated him like anybody else. And apparently he wasn't offended by that, and he kept asking for me to keep cooking for him. I will say that I don't share any of his political views. The most famous story that I like about during that time is that was when Ellison began getting involved in the America's Cup, and he wanted to be a sailor and captain his own boat. But he didn't know anything about sailing. So I remember he'd be taking, you know, some classes from some of the old salty sailors just in the estuary in Alameda, if you're familiar with that. So, you know, it's big enough where you can turn, you know, a boat around and stuff. If you're looking out for big not containers, but, you know, there's a few tugs pulling a few things through there. But anyway, these old salty sailors, they could care less about who Larry Ellison is and was, and they used to just dress him down. Now, the story I heard from his workers is that he was a hard taskmaster, and a lot of people, you know, it's like The Godfather, you know, a mob boss. There's equal amounts of loyalty and fear. And that's how the mob boss continues doing what he's doing. They love him and they fear him. Anyway, Oracle gave the National Republican Senatorial Committee $3,750 on the 25th of March. On the 17th of January, the company promised it would pause contributions to anyone who voted against certifying the November 2020 election results. Well, once again, they can say, I'm not giving it to the candidates. I'm giving it to the senators and the Senate committee, and then they give it. Okay, some people call that money laundering. PG&E, of course. Well, they released a January statement saying the lawlessness and mob violence we have witnessed last week is completely unacceptable, and that it planned listening sessions to better understand our common positions and determine the best path forward. So they decided their best path forward after, a amount of time for America to develop its amnesia was to donate $15,000 on March 9th. Pfizer PAC will not contribute to any of the 147 members of Congress who voted against certifying the Electoral College results after the violence we all witnessed, the company reported in a January internal email. After 6 months, we will review our decision. And they did, except it was only about 2, and they gave $15,000 on March 2nd, less than 2 months later, obviously. PNC Financial Services gave $15,000 on March 24th, But they claimed in January that they had suspended contributions to those members of Congress who voted against certification. Well, once again, they're not giving it to the senators who didn't vote for certification. They're giving it to the Senate committee that hands it out. It's different. Sanofi Chemical Engineering News reported in January that Sanofi and other pharmaceutical firms, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. I only know what I read. Well, they were cutting off donations to those who objected to the Electoral College count, but they decided that their values are perfectly in sync with the Senate committee handing out the money to those 147 who did, and they gave $15,000 on March 17th. Well, after his actions in January, Scott faced calls to resign from his National Republican Senatorial Committee post. The editorial board of the Orlando Sentinel blasted him as, quote, unfit for office, end quote, and one of Florida's enemies of democracy, end quote. But rather than hold him accountable as they promised, those 8 corporations combined to give him at least $108,750 to support his efforts to elect a GOP Senate in 2022. Of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A proposed gun storage law that would be among the toughest in the U.S. is headed for a vote in the Oregon legislature, with backers saying it will save lives and opponents contending it could lead to deaths. Meanwhile, in Colorado, a less sweeping gun storage bill was signed into law on Monday by Governor Jared Polis, who said it's a sensible measure to help avoid immeasurable heartbreak. Colorado's new law creates the offense of unlawful storage of a firearm if a person stores a gun knowingly that a juvenile could access it without permission, or if a resident of the premises is ineligible to possess a firearm. Oregon's bill generated testimony from hundreds of people, mostly in writing because there wasn't enough time to take all the oral testimony. A vote in the Oregon's House of Representatives on the bill, initially scheduled for Monday, was pushed back by a week to enable Democratic representatives to work with the Senate to guarantee the bill is on track to pass and be enacted, said Hannah Kowalski, spokeswoman for the majority House Democrats. Among those testifying was Paul Kemp, whose brother-in-law Steve Forsyth was killed with a stolen gun in a mass shooting at a Portland area shopping mall in 2012. I will never forget the screams I heard when we had to tell my teenage nephew that his father had been killed at the mall, Kemp said. But opponents say forcing people to keep guns locked up could waste precious moments if they need to defend themselves against armed intruders, like people walking outside your property, protesting police violence and racial inequality. Jim Mischel of Sheridan, Oregon, described how his wife woke up when he was away one night in 1981. She heard a noise, went to investigate, and saw that a man had broken into her home. She returned to the bedroom and tried to get a pistol that was in a locked gun box in the nightstand. She was unable to get the box unlocked and the pistol out before he got into the bedroom and threatened her with his gun. She has never recovered. I know a lot of people who are dead from guns, fella. I'm sorry that your wife was threatened. My best friend's family were pistol whipped by a convict. A serial convict, by the way, and he was white, from Texas. Or maybe that's where he ended up. He did end up on death row. Anyway, my best friend's family was completely terrorized, and my best friend's dad was an LAPD homicide detective at the time. And this is out in the San Gabriel Valley where they live. So he was at work and finally got word that what had happened. John's mom crawled almost a mile. This is out in really undeveloped land in the San Gabriel Valley back in the day. This is in the, I guess it would have been the mid-'60s, a little bit earlier. Anyway, and he was just a little guy. The older brother, Ken, was already in high school. Eric, who later went on to become an elected official in Sonoma County, one of the youngest elected officials, by the way, back in the day, Vietnam vet. So he was still in junior high, strapping kids, I might add, but nonetheless, no match for a full-grown ex-convict. So Mrs. Koenigshofer, I'll just put it out there, she crawled a mile to get to a neighbor's house, and then that family, the father and sons, went and tackled the guy and kept him secure, shall we say, until the cops got there, and then Mr. Koenigshofer, George, got there, but he didn't beat the guy up. They gave him an opportunity, just like in Pulp Fiction and L.A. Confidential. They did give him an opportunity to beat the crap out of the guy, but he chose not to because wanted the system to work. But nonetheless, Mrs. Koenigshofer never called for loosening gun laws. Okay? So I'm sorry that your wife got threatened by a gun. How about being pistol whipped and still seeing that this mass influence of guns and weaponry across our society has no place in our society? Oregon's bill mandates that gun owners secure unattended weapons with trigger locks or in lock compartments. Those who don't would strictly be liable for any injuries or property damage. If a minor gets a hold of an unsecured firearm, the gun's owner would face a maximum $2,000 fine. Tensions are running high as Oregon legislators consider this and other gun bills, even leading to death threats. Recently, six Republican state senators stayed for a vote on a different firearms bill instead of doing a walkout in what has become a tactic for them to prevent a vote from taking place. That bill would ban guns from the Capitol and other state buildings and allowed local jurisdictions to decide whether people with a concealed handgun license can bring guns into public buildings. You know, they were all for having guns everywhere until they were threatened by Nazis. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, dementia you won't forget. While Hollywood spends fortunes conjuring horrors to frighten us out of our seats, the prospect of losing one's mind, one's grip on reality, may trump them all. And not far behind might be watching it happen to a loved one. In Florian Zeller's The Father, we get both perspectives, that of Anthony, with Anthony Hopkins in the title role, and that of his daughter Anne, as his caregiver, played mostly by Olivia Colman. I'm not using the term perspectives lightly here. From the stage where this one originated, Anthony's deterioration isn't just documented, the entire narrative shifts to his reality, which is capriciously distorted or lucid, but always changing. There are subtle modifications in the set. Characters he perceives are different actors. Seasons aren't consistent. Is this a gimmick? To my mind, the difference between an effective dramatic technique and a gimmick is whether its contribution is both positive and imperceptibly subsumed into the project. Here, it works, thanks to an astute script and the two wonderful leads, Hopkins and Coleman, either or both of whom are on screen in almost every scene and who deserve every award they've already received or for which they've been nominated. Superb support comes from Olivia Williams, Imogene Poots, and Mark Gatiss, and it's necessary to mention the aforementioned technique. Bringing Anthony's perspective wouldn't have worked at all without some pretty amazing set design, editing, and cinematography. Films about end-of-life issues can win awards, like 2012's L'Amour, or can misfire, like last year's Capone, but they all summon emotion due to the universality of aging. The Father is movie-making at its best, but the subject matter may not make you feel better about anything other than the fact that there is movie-making this good. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Sweetie, want some fruit?
You have to use the right tool for the job. A power drill is the wrong tool to slice fruit. Just like an antibiotic is the wrong tool to treat viruses, including colds and flu. Antibiotics are only needed for certain bacterial infections. When they aren't needed, antibiotics won't help you, and the side effects could still hurt you. Ask your healthcare professional when an antibiotic is the right tool and when it's not. Visit cdc.gov/antibiotic-use.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can an air freshener kill you? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. You know, one of those tree-shaped thingamabobs that dangle from the rear-view mirror of cars. A majority of states have laws that prohibit an object near a windshield from obstructing a driver's view. But what actually makes an air freshener dangerous is not that it might obstruct the driver's view, but rather that cops can use the air freshener as a pretext to stop the car. Air fresheners, dice, the wrong tin on a windshield, dirt on a license plate allegedly obscuring a number or a letter, a rear license plate light or a tail light being out, an expired inspection sticker or registration tag. There are so many alleged minimal infractions that can be used as a pretext for a traffic stop by an armed police officer. Those low-level traffic infractions, studies prove, disproportionately target people of color, and they should not be handled by police officers at all. The costs far outweigh the benefits. The traffic stops too often lead to an interrogation in order to step out of the car, a pat-down or a frisk, a search, escalation, and, as in the case of Dwante Wright in Minneapolis, a shooting and death. And so we hold these truths to be self-evident. There are too many deaths of drivers and passengers, disproportionately people of color, caused by unnecessary traffic stops. And use of an air freshener should not prove fatal. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1967. That was the day the Taylor Law went into effect in New York State. It was celebrated for granting public employees the right to organize and elect union representation. But it's also roundly criticized for stripping public sector workers of their right to strike. It was crafted and enacted in response to the militant, victorious New York City transit strike of January 1966. The Taylor Act amended key points of the 1947 Condon-Wadlin Act. which first prohibited public sector strikes in the aftermath of a teacher strike in Buffalo. But strikes persisted, and the act was seen as largely unenforceable. In the aftermath of the 1966 transit strike, New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller appointed a committee chaired by labor relations professor George Taylor to make, quote, proposals for protecting the public against the disruptions of vital public services by illegal strikes, while at the same time protecting the rights of public employees. In addition to granting the right to organize, the Taylor Act also establishes impasse procedures for dispute resolution, defines and prohibits improper practices, prohibits strikes by public employees, and established the Public Employment Relations Board. But public sector unions argue the law gives no incentive for employers to settle disputes or negotiate contracts in a timely manner or in good faith. While public sector unions have struck since its enactment, Transport Workers Union 100 was subjected to harsh fines in both the 1980 and 2005 transit strikes. During the 2005 walkout, TWU 100 was issued a $1 million a day penalty, its automatic dues collection was suspended, and its leader Roger Toussaint was jailed for 10 days. The union continues to push for changes to the law. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 75, maybe a tad warmer. Plentiful sunshine, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds tonight, otherwise generally clear with lows in the mid to low 40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs only in the low 70s, only. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 9,984 with 127 confirmed deceased. And, people are like, I don't want to wear a mask now. Yeah, well, you better. Grass pollen is now rated as low right outside the window here in Rogue River proper, and the air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 31 parts per million. Please don't foul it with your burning trash, please. And the daytime UV index is in the moderate range, though it has clicked up to 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches, visibility is at 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 77%. We do have rain still forecast for over the weekend and into next week. It looks like it could be a good drenching. Let's hope it happens. Because, we have a drought here in the West, damn it. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, affectionately known as the Weather Underground. London is 55 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 66 degrees and sunny. Oh, Paris, I love it this time of year. Rome is 63 and partly cloudy. I love Rome this time of year too, though it looks like, they do have a flash flood warning from thunderstorms, which brings rain, Kyiv is 56 and fair. Kabul is 61 and fair. Hong Kong is 71 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 62 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and partly cloudy with a wind advisory for small craft on the bay and offshore, so do take care. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. There's been a dramatic deterioration of press freedom since the pandemic started to tear across the world, Reporters Without Borders said in its annual report published yesterday, Tuesday. The group's new World Press Freedom Index, which evaluated the press situations in 180 countries, painted a stark picture and concluded that 73% of the world's nations have serious issues with media freedoms. You know, like America, where we got cops telling journalists, lay down on down on the ground. Show me your ID. And then they take their cameras and beat them over the face with it. Wow. It says countries have used the coronavirus pandemic, which erupted in China in late 2019, as grounds to block journalists' access to information sources and reporting in the field. This is particularly the case in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, the media group said. Journalism is the best vaccine against disinformation, RSF Secretary General Christophe Deloy said. Unfortunately, its production and distribution are too often blocked by political, economic, technological, and sometimes even cultural factors. In response to the virility of disinformation across borders, on digital platforms, and via social media, journalism provides the most effective means of ensuring that public debate is based on a diverse range of established facts. Issues have arisen from a drop in public trust in journalism itself. The group said 59% of people polled in 28 countries claim that journalists deliberately try to mislead the public by reporting information they know to be false.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mari Yamaguchi of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tokyo police are investigating cyberattacks on about 200 Japanese companies and research organizations, including the country's space agency, by a hacking group believed to be linked to the Chinese military, the government said yesterday, Tuesday. Police have forwarded the case involving the attacks on the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency to prosecutors for further investigation. Police believe a series of hacks of JAXA were conducted in 2016 and 17 by TIC, a Chinese cyber attack group under the direction of a unit of the People's Liberation Army. A suspect in the JAXA case, a Chinese systems engineer based in Japan, allegedly gained access to a rental server by registering himself under a false identity to launch the cyber attacks. NHK Public Television said another Chinese national with suspected links to the group, who was in Japan as an exchange student, was also investigated in the case. Both men have since left the country. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.